Okay, guys, welcome to another lesson from Mr. Rodriguez in our online e-learning class. Today we're going to be doing Pre-AP Unit 2, Lesson 1.3. The poem we're going to be dealing with is The Fight, and the title of the lesson is Word Choice That Matters. And in this lesson, we're going to be looking at how a poet can use very specific and intentional word choice to sort of guide the audience and lead them to an understanding of the text. So we're going to begin by opening with a close reading and observation, and we're going to begin by first thinking about this poem. So we're going to read John Montague's poem, The Fight, and it's considered a narrative poem because it tells the story. So we're going to try and summarize the story of the fight in 2 sentences or less. I'm going to read the poem aloud to you now. It's called The Fight by John Montague. When I found the swallow's nest under the bridge, ankle deep in the bog stream, traffic drummed overhead. I was so pleased. I ran to fetch a school companion to share the nude fragility of the shells, lightly freckled with color. In their cradle of feathers, twigs, earth. It was still breast warm when I curved my hand to count them, one by one, into his cold palm, a kind of trophy or offering. Turning my back to scoop out the last, I heard him run down an echoing hollow of the bridge, splashing after I bent tangled in the bull wire at the bridge's mouth, when I saw him take and break them, one by one, against a sunlit stone. For minutes we fought, standing and falling in the river's brown spate, and I would still fight, though now I can forgive. To worship or to destroy beauty, that double edge of impulse I recognize by which we live, but also the bitter paradox of betraying love to harm, then lunging, too late, with fists to its defense. So that's our poem that we're looking at, and you have a copy of this in the post on Edsby. So you're going to look at this poem, John Montague's The Fight, and try and come up with a 2 sentence maximum summary. So no more than 2 sentences, but it should be at least one full, complete sentence to summarize what happens in this poem. So I'm going to ask you to pause now and think about that and answer that question, and then we can go over to the next question. Welcome back. So hopefully you got a chance to write your summary. So here's my question, and this will show up in the Edsby. How many times does the word egg show up in the poem? Before you look back at the poem, think about it. Take a guess. On the Edsby quiz that I have posted for you for your assessment, it's gonna give you a multiple choice question. So I'd like you to pause now and take a second and try and answer that question. Okay, welcome back. How many of you are going to be surprised to realize it was none? At no point in this entire poem did the author ever say the word egg. He leads you to believe it because of his descriptions and the things he included. So let's think about this. So for our reasoning, a word acts as a label for a thing or idea that it represents. And writers sometimes intentionally avoid using the most obvious word so that you, the reader, can see exactly what the writer wants you to see instead of what your preconceived notion you may associate with that word. When we think of an egg, we all have an idea in our mind. So for example, what do you see when you think about the idea of an egg? Is it a large, white, or maybe brown chicken eggs that you get at the grocery store? That's probably what a lot of us think of when we see an egg. But I'm going to show you a picture and let's talk about what this looks like. Those are eggs too, but we see that those are sort of wild eggs in a nest. And that is what the author's trying to get us to imagine. And so he's avoiding explicitly, directly saying egg, because in our mind, we're going to go quickly to that grocery store image of the egg. So now let's talk about noticing some details. With that distinction in mind, I want you to look back and reread the fight and answer the following question. And you'll be completing this one on your EDSB assessment. What language does Montague use to refer to the eggs without using the word eggs? So my question on EDSB is going to ask you to try and find two different places where he gives you a description that makes you think egg. It screams egg without ever actually saying egg. So pause now, take a second, and try and find those in the text. Okay, great. Hopefully everyone got a chance to find that. And now we're going to use that in a second question for the EDSB assessment. So now choose one example and complete the following sentence frame. Montague's use of whichever example you came up with in the fight suggests that to the reader that what? What does the image he creates show to you, the reader? So that's giving you a chance to now take the evidence you're pulling from the text, making an inference based on it, and coming up with a really nice statement to make an explanation for the thing you found and showing what that means. So if you want to pause now, you can go try and answer that question, fill in your frame sentence, and then we'll be looking at the next question in just a second. Okay, welcome back. So now let's talk about some of the poet's choices. So we're going to look closely now at a section from stanza 2. Turning back to scoop out the last, I heard him run down the echoing hollow of the bridge, splashing after I bent tangled in bull wire at the bridge's mouth. Do you see anything peculiar in this example? Of course you do. The word turning is split between two lines. Now, we see words split between lines often in prose, but in poetry it's not necessary because in most cases the lines never go long enough that you're running out of room and trying to fit it in the next place. So when the author does this, they do this for a very specific reason. How would the moment in the poem be different if he placed all of the word turning next to the line? Well, to get to that answer, we have to think about what does this turning do in this part of the poem. So we're going to take a second and look back at the poem. We have to reference the text and help get our ideas together. So when we look back at the text, when that turning has happened, he's offering the egg to his friend. But this offering doesn't go well. And this sort of becomes a turning point in the situation. Now, I'm going to take a minute here to talk about the poem as a whole to help you understand what's going on. So when we start to look at stanza 1, we see that a boy is finding a swallow's nest. The swallow's a small bird, and he's sort of been out exploring, and he runs because he's so excited to show one of his friends this cool thing that he found. And he's talks about these nude fragility of the shells, that they're fleckled with color. They're in a cradle of feather, twigs, and earth. So these eggs are sort of vulnerable. They're able to be hurt here, and the boy just finds this so interesting and cool, he wants to go show his friends. We shift into stanza 2, and in the beginning of that stanza, we still see the delicate nature that the author is proposing. But that shifts in this part we talk about here. And as we get to this turning, we see that he's giving the eggs to his friend. He scoops them out, and then he hears his friend running, and he's excited, and he's jumping around. And so he's chasing after his friend because he doesn't know what he's going to do with these eggs. The eggs need to be left in the nest. That's how they're taken care of. So then we see at the end of stanza 2 that the boy's friend takes the egg and smashes them, sacrificing them on a stone, because these eggs would become birds. And so it's an image that strikes me as a sacrifice, because you have that idea of sacrificing something or some animal or someone on a like a stone table. So against this stone in the sun. And then we go to the next stanza. It's much shorter and a little bit less detailed. We don't see the same description there. And if you ever think about someone who's been in a fight, it's not about the details. It's sort of about what happened in the flurry of action. So he says, "For minutes we fought, standing and falling in the brown river spate, and I would still fight, though now I can forgive." So he stands by what he did in fighting his friend, but he can also forgive him, and that explanation comes to us in the last stanza. And that's where we lead off to for our next slide. So we're going to reread the final stanza of John Montague's poem, The Fight. How is this stanza different from the rest of the poem? So when we see this, to worship or destroy beauty, that double edge of impulse I recognize by which we live, but also the bitter paradox of betraying love to harm, then lunging too late with fists to its defense. Now, I have the asterisk in here to note for you guys that this is the British spelling. John Montague was Irish, so this is not misspelled. It's his spelling in England. That's how they would spell those words. But I wanted to note that so that you might be thinking, what is wrong with this person? So now, when we see this, is this the same boy who runs through the forest and shows his friend these eggs? Or is this someone different? And we see that difference actually begins at line 30. Now I can forgive. So now we're reaching from that childish John Montague who was running through the forest to the present, the adult John Montague who's thinking back on this situation. And as we look back on this situation, we see this information here for us. And this double edge of impulse that's a big idea. It's got some meat to it. So you have to think about that. It's the good and evil nature in all mankind he's talking about. So he gives some examples about love and harm, about lunging too late with fists clenched in defense, and fighting to defend something, and love and harm. And this idea of a paradox is two things that seem contrasting in that they couldn't happen, but they do, and it's to make a point. So you'll definitely want to consider how those pieces come together in your answer to this question: how is the stanza different from the rest of the poem? Now we're going to go on to the next slide, but you may want to pause now so you can get those answers together. And now we're leading off in our reflection. In a brief paragraph, how did the author's use of pivotal words and phrases develop the theme of the poem? Now, this is a pretty big question. It's got some meaty ideas to it, but Mr. Rodriguez has your back. So let's look. I gave you sort of a modified single paragraph outline so that you can help get your ideas together. So you're going to start off with your thesis. What is Montague's purpose? How did the words or phrases build that idea for his purpose? What is his big idea, and how are the words building that idea? So that's going to be your big opening sentence, your introductory sentence, your thesis, your claim in this paragraph. And I put off to the side with some asterisks a couple of hints. Here you could use your kernel expansion, where you start with your basic idea. His purpose was to show what? And then you add whose, John Montague's, when, in his poem, so that you can add those details so you can have a really nice, beautiful topic sentence here. Then you're going to go to your evidence and explanation one. So you're going to give an explanation piece of evidence. This could be 1 or 2 sentences. This does not have to be a long 3, 4 multi-sentence explanation. But what is one of the specific things you want to point out? And let's look back at the prompt and his words and phrases that he uses to develop theme. What is a word or phrase that helps contribute to that theme you decided? What is his point that he's trying to make? What is his universal idea he's trying to get to? Then the second one, what is another of the things Montague uses to develop this? So what's another place where he uses a contrast, a phrase, juxtaposition between two things? The things we've been talking about in class when we're talking about literature, we're just using it now to talk about poetry. And then for our conclusion, how does it all fit together? How do these words contribute to this idea? And remember, if you're stuck on a conclusion, the best place to start is a because, but, so. So John Montague wants to show what, because what happens, but this happens, so he continues to explain this. And however you want to approach those ideas and explain that is definitely up to you, but those are some really great resources to help you get a really nice quality paragraph here. So this should have a topic sentence, a couple of pieces of evidence that you're explaining, and a conclusion sentence. And I'm going to be looking for all of those things in the work you submit. Again, make sure if you have questions, you can send me questions through Edsby, and then these resources are available to you so that you can get the answers really good. And take some time, make sure you watch the video, maybe pause it and go back and forth, maybe watch it once and then go back again for parts you need. But you all are definitely capable of doing this, and I'm 100% sure of that. But I want to remember that you got to take care of yourself, and I'm going to end with my be brave, be bold, be creative, be kind, be smart, but above all, be yourself.